All right, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, one of the things I wanted to do today is I wanted to make sure that I reviewed things that were probably the most confusing for you. So when I did a little bit of review and reflecting on Wednesday, I took a look at all the data and I wanted to see which questions were missed the most. Well, the number one that popped up on the charts was anything that had to do with dependent and independent variables. So now, this was a topic that was done not just in the math classroom, but also in the science classroom. So, what I would like to do now is review this once again, making sure that you understand how basic this concept actually is. Now, in your classes, we talked about the dependent and independent variables. We talked about which letters they represent. The dependent variable always is represented by the value of y, and the independent variable is always represented by the value of x. Now, when you saw this on a graph or a chart, the x was always on the horizontal, the y was always vertical. But now what you're asked to do is you're asked to build equations. Now, in the beginning of the year, we solved one variable equations, and they were the real basic ones. You did a little bit of that in elementary school as well. Now the equations we deal with are a lot simpler looking, but they don't just have one thing missing, they have two. One of the variables depends upon the other variable. There also has to be a piece of knowledge in the problem, a given. They have to give you a value that you end up having to use. When you build your equations for both dependent and independent, look at my model here on this page. The dependent variable, whatever they use, has to go on the left side of the equation all by itself. And on the right side of the equation, you're going to have your independent variable, but there will always be a value in front of it, meaning multiply. And that value is the constant. Something always stays the same in your math problem. So let's look at a real basic example, and then let's tackle the one that was in your homework. Alright, so let's take a look at our example. An apple market. It's a picture problem, but nonetheless, it's just like a word problem. The only thing I know in the problem is that apples cost 35 cents a pound. So there are two variables in this problem that are missing. The first of the variables is if I go to the apple market means I want to buy apples, so I need to know how many pounds of apples am I going to buy. And then secondly, I need to know how much I am going to spend in total. So one of these variables is dependent and the other is independent. So stop, pause, and think. Think which of these is in my control and which of these is not. Because the one in my control is independent. You see, when I go to the market, I might want to buy a lot of apples. I might want to buy very little apples. So this is something that I can control. And this is what's identified as the independent variable. Then, depending on how many apples I buy in the pound of apples, it's going to determine a cost. The cost depends on how many pounds of apples I buy. If I buy a few pounds, it doesn't cost nearly as much as if I bought a bunch of pounds of apples. So then you would set your formula up like you need it to be. So now, here's my equation. Notice the cost is by itself on the left-hand side. This is my dependent variable. On the right-hand side, notice first I converted 35 cents into what it is as a dollar, 0.35. And then the P stands for how many pounds of apples I'm gonna buy. So now this is my equation that sets up here using my independent and dependent variables. Now, things that I can do, now I can use this equation to find out some information in my problem. If I wanted to know how much 2 pounds of apples would cost, I would put a 2 in for P. Then I would multiply 0.35 times 2, and then it would cost me 70 cents in total. Vice versa. If I put a 5 in for pounds, for P, Then I would take 0.35 and multiply that by 5, and that would give me $1.75 for a total cost. So now I'm able to use this equation that I built by using my independent dependent variable. So now let's tackle the one you had in your assignment. Alright, so here was our problem in our assignment. This person's making scarves for her friends. Now, how many scarves can she make? Well, it depends. So right there, scarves is going to represent my dependent variable because the scarves depend on how much yarn you have. And then what happens is if you look at all the choices have the letter S already on the left-hand side. So we don't have to worry about any of that. Now we go to the right-hand side. The variable that they're using for yarn is Y. So then we go into the problem and we look at the other value that's involved there, and it says that you have 1.5 skeins of yarn. Now, if you didn't know what the word skeins mean, you could have easily went on in Google, take a look at it, and then what you'd find out is it's a length of thread or yarn loosely coiled and knotted. So now, if you're not sure, the key when you go through a word problem, especially in your assignments or your homework, if there's something you don't know, look it up. So now you need 1.5 skeins of yarn for every single scarf. And remember, the word of in math means multiply. So we're looking for an answer that has 1.5 Y. 1.5 times the amount of yarn. So this was the problem that you had in your homework. Answer is obviously going to be A. And that is that. I hope you found this both helpful and informative. And also for future reference, if there's anything you are stuck on math related, look me up, NH Green Math on YouTube. Over and out.